It's the Fightful MMA Holy Smokes Podcast with Showdown Joe and Sean Ross Sapp.
Joe, we are live.
What's up, everybody? October 31st, Halloween edition of this week's Holy Smokes Podcast. Yours truly, Joe Ferraro, joined as always by Sean Ross Sapp. Make sure you give us a follow. Myself at Showdown Joe, Sean Ross Sapp at Sean Ross Sapp, and of course at Fightful Online. We are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook. Share the love. Tell your friends we are live right now. Get it out there on social media. Let's get this community up and running because we got so many things to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, we will preview UFC 217 and my weird thoughts. I haven't told Sean yet about the lack of buzz of George St. Pierre returning to the octagon here in Canada. We'll get to that in a moment. Of course, we will talk about George St. Pierre, his fight versus Michael Bisping. Cody Garbrandt finally returning to the octagon to defend his title for the very first time, taking on former champion TJ Dillashaw. Joanna Jacek, Joanna champion, Joanna champion, whatever you want to call her. She's defending against Rose Namajunas. She's a massive, the biggest favorite on this card. We will get to that in a moment. We'll also recap UFC Sao Paulo. We'll take a look at a quick preview of Bellator 186. I had a chance to catch up with Jason Parillo. For those who don't know, an exceptional boxing coach. He's been working with the likes from way back when with Tito Ortiz, BJ Penn, now exclusively with Michael Bisping, and of course Cristian Cyborg Santos. We will hear from him in a bit. Colby Covington, was he out of line with his post-interview, leading up to the fight, his post-interview comments? Lots to talk about there. Lyoto Machida obviously getting destroyed in that main event in Sao Paulo. Is he done? We will discuss that. We'll get your thoughts as well via the live chat. Andre Arlovski switching camps. Are we surprised about that? And unfortunately, for all you mixed martial arts fans who really like and enjoy the ladies competing, Raquel Pennington is out. A terrible, terrible accident on an annual hunting trip. We will dissect that. Sean Ross Sapp and I will dissect that to see what is happening with that.
Maybe the most loaded show we've ever had. There's so much to talk about today. There's a ton.
Something tells me this will not be a 15-minute podcast, Sean.
No, it will not. You had a conversation with Jason Parillo that I really liked. The full version of that will be up on Fightful, but we do have an excerpt. But, man, let's go ahead and talk about UFC Sao Paulo right now. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the big story. The real main event of that show was Colby Covington versus Demian Maia. And it wasn't even that Colby Covington won because, you know, it's just that time. You're starting to see a lot of these established guys get beaten by the likes of Colby Covington. I think that's good for the UFC. I think what he said afterwards was, too, the next day, when I saw all the outrage, I didn't understand it, Joe. What am I missing? Am I missing? Like, what? Filthy animals? That's where we draw the line now?
Yeah, I think so when I first heard it, I was like, whoa, dude, you're brave. You are brave doing that in Brazil. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, and I saw some of his post-fight interviews, and he's like, well, you know what? These guys are, the Brazilian fans are always chanting, "You're gonna die, you're gonna die," and stuff like that. It's difficult
Pardon my language, guys. They also chant "faggot" in Brazilian at fighters.
Yes,
this has happened before numerous times.
So we have to figure out where is this line being drawn. Is it okay for fans to do that and fighters not to react, or fighters saying, you know what? You guys did all this. You made my life miserable leading up to this fight. Or is there a line there? Like, for example, Senior Vice President for the UFC, David Shaw, Canadian here, transplanted to Vegas. He's saying, that our Code of Conducts Committee is going to have to take a look at this because we don't really like this. But at the same time, there's always that fine line being pushed by guys like Conor McGregor, back in the day, Chael Sonnen, Tito Ortiz, Frank Trigg. Guys have pushed the line before. Now, Colby Covington saying this place is a pile of dump or whatever he called it, bunch of animals, filthy animals and stuff like that. I get it from his perspective, young guy, just trying to promote the sport. But we're talking about him right now. So he's going to go Sean, from who the heck is Colby Covington to now everybody is going to want to see this guy fight now.
I saw a lot of false equivalencies and stuff like that being thrown out in regards to this. He called them filthy animals. It's something you see in Angels with Dirty Faces from Home Alone 1. That may have been the first insult I ever learned in my entire life was, "you filthy animal." And made it controversial in 2017, 27 years after Home Alone 1 released. Like, hey, thanks for the publicity for my Sticky Bandits costume for Halloween, by the way, Colby Covington. I heard this and I was like, this is great. This is good. And I saw, like I said, the false equivalencies. People are like, oh, well, he looked terrible. Whatever. He just beat Damian Maia. He just beat Damian Maia, who I have referred to as the knuckleballer of MMA, but he beat Damian Maia. I don't care how he did it. He beat him. He won the fight. And then I saw some people on Twitter that were like, well, it's a lot of like angry jiu-jitsu fans too. And I was like, that could be it too, because we've seen that happen before too, where like a Gracie gets beaten and there's a lot of excuses that are made. Does Colby Covington say some dumb stuff? Yeah, all the time, man. Like, some of the stuff he says, I'm like, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't say that. But I didn't think this was bad at all. I thought that, like, this is where we draw the line. Filthy animal. 7 years ago, Chael Sonnen was talking about how we have all this ingenuity and technology in America, and when he went to Brazil, they were playing in the mud with sticks. Like, that's far worse. He cut a louder, tamer version of a Chael Sonnen promo from every promo he did from 2010 to 2012. I don't see the outrage here.
I think the satire of Chael Sonnen was one thing which caused, an uproar. I think what Colby Covington did with the passion and the exuberance that he had in that post-fight interview is what created the outrage. Right? So you take a look at that. He did it in Brazil, in the octagon, while they're booing and screaming at him, ripping them a new one, saying what he had to say, and then, having to be escorted by 20 guys covering his head because bottles were being thrown at him. Brazil's a zoo, man. I'm telling you right now, Brazil, those guys are passionate. The fans are passionate, and they don't want any outsider coming in and taking shots at them, despite the fact that he just defeated, what may be a UFC Hall of Famer one day. They didn't take well to it. Ballsy, very ballsy on Colby's part. And when I initially heard it, Sean, like I said, I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, whoa, dude, you're crazy. You can't be saying stuff like that. And now after a little bit, I was like, we're going to be talking about this on Tuesday, aren't we? So, and here we are today. We're still talking about it. I mean, it's caused a bit of outrage within the American Top Team family. I mean, Laborio said, he's no longer with them, but he's been gone for a while anyway.
Get out of here. Yeah. Blaming it on that. Like, that was a Michael Jordan in the fourth quarter on Space Jam stretch to try to make that the same. That wasn't white.
I don't think Laborio was blaming him, though. I think he was just saying he was.
He was.
He was using it as a platform, but he was more or less sticking up for his country, sticking up for like, look, man, we're not like that, and blah blah.
How many Brazilians have we seen do this though? Like, they've done it about America a million times. You know what? Probably my favorite thing was when Colby Covington said, "We don't need a translator. They don't deserve one." That was gold. He is the heel. He is now the number 3 ranked welterweight in the UFC. Think about that, Joe. Number 3. He's above. Here are some of the people in the UFC ranked lower than him in their respective divisions: Nate Diaz, Eddie Alvarez, Shogun Rua, Mark Hunt, Cain Velasquez is a number 3. Yoel Romero was a number 3. These are some of the people that are there. And he is a number 3. That is good on him. This welterweight division, as the article that I waited to publish that you wrote will detail, the welterweight division just everywhere right now. I love the new blood. I love the change. I love it.
Yeah, and what do you think of this? And even everyone in the live chat, I want to get your thoughts on not just Colby Covington saying what he said about Brazilians. He's even taking shots at his own teammates in Robbie Lawler, and Tyron Woodley's an ATT guy as well. Whoa,
yeah, he says that Tyron Woodley is more of just like he paid to be an affiliate so he'd make more money type of thing. But yeah, that good. He should be indiscriminate about who he discriminates against. He should be indiscriminately discriminate. There's a question on the chat. Any insight on maybe Usman Covington in the future? And they said, despite the Meek contract, rumors were flying that ya boy Kamaru and Colby Covington are being targeted for December 30th. I think that would be a much better fight than the Meek fight, but it wouldn't, I'd be surprised if they pulled him from one booking to put him in another.
I'm actually, if you can hear me typing, I'm texting Kamaru right now. So we'll see if we get
go.
a reply. He may not. I actually think it's 3:00 now, or 3:17, so he's probably in training, but you never know. Give me 1 second here. The potential Colby fight for if he answers no, I will absolutely pee my pants, not going to lie to you.
So, by the way, also, speaking of controversial things, Conor McGregor released an apology for using the terminology he used. Don't want to get into that heavily, just good on him for doing so.
Yeah.
Also, before we went on the air, it was revealed that Eric Perez, Goito, signed with Combate Americas. His contract with UFC ran out, and he opted to head to Combate, and now we're starting to see this a lot. We've seen...
Great fit for him, obviously, with Combate America really focusing on the Latin market. So a good fit for him. I'm kind of surprised and sad it didn't work out for him in the UFC because they had a lot of high hopes for him. It just didn't translate well in the octagon. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of guys beginning to migrate outside of the UFC and heading over to other organizations, be it Bellator, be it Ryzen, and or Combate America. So
yeah, good move for him. I really... You know, I like it for a spreading the wealth type of situation that guys from Mexico, guys from Russia, guys from Europe, guys from Japan are starting to get decent offers from from promotions in their home countries. So that's kind of good. And it's almost a shame. Like, it could have been almost like the Fedor thing where... Or gosh, who was the other? There were some guys that UFC... Nikita Krylov. UFC lost him, but he signed with a company that was on Fight Pass. So, like, what did they lose? Type of thing. Like, and Combate was on Fight Pass. They
were
now
on Fight Pass. Yeah, they're not anymore. Correct.
Also, this Pennington injury, that's a killer. That sucks.
It goes to a lot of things, Sean, and I'll tell you why. When I remember, I think it was my second contract that I signed with Sportsnet. If I'm not mistaken, there was a conversation. I don't think they put it on paper, but there was a conversation of me having to be relatively careful in my training, any mixed martial arts training. They knew I attempted snowboarding. Miserably failed on numerous occasions, but I kept going. I'm a very stubborn man. I want to be the best at anything that I can do physically, and I kept going. I used to ride a motorcycle, so there were different conversations of them saying it's just them protecting their asset, right? I'm the host of their TV show. I'm the UFC guy on a national network. So there was always that conversation. Look, Joe, we'd prefer if you don't do this or you don't do that. You know, and the UFC has somebody like, you know, Cowboy Cerrone, who, you know, probably the day of fights is out wakeboarding. Raquel Pennington went on an annual hunting trip with her family, and just it went wrong. It went wrong, and it's tough to say, you know, what kind of insurance she's going to have now to cover that. Hopefully, everything's going to be fine. But this kind of stuff happens. It sucks. You would think potentially, Sean, that they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't risk certain things because one injury, and now that your biggest money making opportunity is now gone. So I really feel bad for Raquel. I get the injury, man. Things happen on four-wheelers all the time. I mean, I flipped off a four-wheeler before, never hurt myself, just kind of flew back, hit the throttle way too hard. But other than that, I mean, I feel terrible for her, man. This was a title shot for her.
Yeah, and who knows if she'll get it once she's back, because this was the right situation for her to be in, that she was on a good winning streak. There was nobody else. Look up and down this division, man. It's a sad state of affairs right now. But you never know, because, Joe, it was looking foggy for the welterweight division. A couple months ago? So you never know how that can hash out. But look at it. Number one, Valentina Shevchenko. Can you really run that fight back so quick, and can you do it 3 times in 2 years? Especially with her saying, I want to go to 125? I don't think so. Holly Holm looks primed for Cyborg, and right now, that's the more important fight. That fight's more important than Amanda Nunes, in my opinion. Juliana Pena, she's pregnant. She'll probably I can't believe they didn't pull her from the rankings. Pennington hurt. Ronda Rousey, gone. Can't do it. I hear a lot of people saying, well, Kat Zingano. And I say, huh? Dubois? I'll hit him with the Dubois. You mean the girl who hasn't won in 3 years? I get it. She has a win over Amanda Nunes, but she has literally never won a fight since her title shot. Like, that's not the way this should work. Sarah McMahon coming off of a loss. Jermaine Durandamy Can you do it? She's coming off a hand surgery. Can you do it after what happened? Well, ideally, you can say a champion who's never been beaten. Sure, you could go that route if you want. What else you got there? Marion Renault. She's unbeaten in 3 fights. I don't know if that's what you want to do there. Alexis Davis. She's booked against Liz Carmouche. Liz Carmouche is an interesting name. If she beats Alexis Davis, maybe, but that's in December. They wanted Nunes to fight around then. I don't know who they could do. Maybe Vieira in Brazil as a co-main event or a main event or something. Like if you have is there a pay-per-view set for Brazil anytime soon? I don't think so. Man, that's a rough one too, man. That's a tough, bad situation that division's in. It's ugly.
It is, unfortunately. I mean, you take a look, like you said, you went up and down the rankings there. It's tough. And I get the Katzengano part because she's got cachet to her name, right? And that's why people will say, yeah, Katzengano. But at the same time, you take a look at what Amanda's done to this division. Raquel was the challenger, you know? The only argument that I could make for the Shevchenko trilogy fight is because of the controversy in the rematch, right? Some people said she won. Others said that Amanda won. So I could see the UFC trying to capitalize on that, but yeah, it's going to be a tough go. What do they do with Amanda Nunes now? I mean, it's weird because Cyborg and Holly are going to be competing, you know, likely December 30th, which is still not confirmed, which is still hasn't been announced.
Somebody says, sign somebody for Invicta. Who?
Yeah, that's the problem. You can't do that. That's going to then bypass the line of the UFC people that are ranked. Can't. Man.
And I mean, there's nobody in Invicta. There's one undefeated bantamweight fighter in Invicta in Invicta, and she's 4-2 overall. 1-0 in Invicta, 4-2 overall. Other than that, you don't have anybody. There just isn't anybody. It's maybe Vieira in Brazil, but God, they'll probably run back Shevchenko, but I really wanted to see her at 125. If Durandamy can get healthy, I'd be all for that fight, but that was a bad look. Bad look. Ugh.
I don't like Durandamy's chances against Amanda.
Let's put a bow on UFC Sao Paulo. That was a fun show.
Yeah,
man,
it actually
lots
was.
of good stuff there. Brunson, deading Machida.
Oh God, can you imagine that? I mean, I wrote that piece for the website, thinking to myself, I don't know if Machida's got a shot here, but let's say for argument's sake that he does. So I went through a bunch of things that could potentially happen if he does win. What does he have to do to get anywhere near a title shot? And I swear to you guys, I'm writing this thing going, he's not going to win, man. He's just the odds of it happening. Anything can happen in MMA. You know, Derek Brunson is known to be a very quick starter, not exactly patient. And when he makes that mistake, it's guys like Machida that will make him pay. I kind of harken back to the Ryan Bader fight with Machida, but that was such a long time ago. And with Machida being off for so long, he's taking a beating. He's just going down. He's taking these shots that are shutting out the lights, like we saw with Chuck Liddell against Shogun back in the day. These are the shots that are just lights out for these guys that have been competing for so long. And it's got me thinking, you know, good on Derek Brunson for getting back in the win column. Machida may have to hang them up, man.
Yeah, I think it's time. He'll probably try to fight one more time. If I were him, I would make that go at 205. See what your skills translate back to at 205. If it doesn't work out, hang him up, man. Or at the very least, take one of these big ass deals from Bellator, because that's always on the table, man. Him versus Chael Sonnen in Bellator would probably turn some heads. If I were booking a UFC show for the future, there were a lot of results on this show that I wanted to happen that did happen. Pedro Munoz getting a win. That's good for that market especially. Francisco Trinaldo, who is, to put it in perspective, Francisco Trinaldo has won 8 of 9 fights, and he's ranked 15th in that division.
Yep. Deep, man.
Deep.
Flyweight.
And the one guy he lost to, Kevin Lee.
And a guy he almost beat because
Yes.
he got that first round. He won that first round, putting Kevin Lee in a lot of trouble. You can make the argument that first round perhaps was a 10-8 for Trinaldo, and then just things went south with Kevin Lee being Kevin Lee and then getting that rear naked choke. So
If only Kevin Lee had staff going into that fight.
Jesus.
Thiago Santos winning his third in a row and finishing Hermanson with 1 second left. Great for that market too. How about Dos Santos and Max Griffin? That's Dos Santos' fourth win in a row. You're starting to see like there was this upswell of Brazilian talent, and then it kind of, went downhill a little bit. You're starting to see that emergence again. John Lineker.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point.
John Lineker winning again. Vicente Luque beating Nico Price. Nico Price beating him with a Darce choke. That's impressive. Here's what I say. Get Shoeface on the main card from now on. I love this guy. Good.
That guy there is something else.
Yeah.
Like, what did you and I talk about on last Tuesday? If Jack Marshman cannot keep that fight standing, that fight hits the ground, it's game over. This kid, Carlos is just one of those guys that when that fight hits the ground, it's going to get ugly for anybody. That guy there has got some skills. He
went into the Ultimate Fighter 3-0 in his career.
Yeah.
3-0. Young, super young. Like, when was that? 2013, 2014? So that was almost 4 years ago. He was 22, 23. Since then, he's had, including the Ultimate Fighter, I think 12 fights, 2 losses in that time. 2 losses, 12 fights, one of which is to Dan Kelly, who I think he beats real quick these days. Other loss was to Patrick Cummins, a perennial top 15 light heavyweight, before he moved down. 27 years old, I think the world of this guy. I think they could be positive. There was a lot of good from the UFC's perspective that came out of this show. Because you can look at your next Brazil show and said, hey, let's throw all these Brazilians that just won back on this show. Let's do it, man. They're winning. That's gotta feel good for the UFC to have that happening again.
Of course. There was that one camera angle when Antonio Carlos Jr. had Mount on Marshman. I've never seen somebody like. So when there was one, I did a couple seminars and some conversations with Greg Jackson and Faraz Zahabi, and Greg Jackson was all about when you're mounted on someone high, you have to you throw down like a piston. You keep your shoulders up and you throw down like a piston. Antonio Carlos Jr., he was like turning and getting torque and not just like punching at Jack's face, punching through his face and just like with disgust in the mount. I was like, wow, like this guy's crazy. And then my highlight, of course, of not just the whole show. I love the whole show. It was fantastic. But the highlight for me, and I tell these stories all the time, Sean, is sitting there, great dad, watching it with my 6.5, almost 7-year-old, and him watching John Lineker and him looking at me and saying, is that one of your friends? Because he roots for those that are my friends.
Sure.
In essence, people that I've interviewed, people that I've just met or along the way. I said, yes, I see John Lineker all the time and at Titan FC events, and he kind of hides with his crew. But I see John all the time. He's like, your friend is strong. I said, what do you mean by strong? And he gets off the couch and he literally looks like he puts his hands up like this. And he's sitting there. He's like, just the way he punches people, Dad. He's mean. And I was like, damn right, 7 years old looking at this, and he knows exactly. John Lineker for me was a highlight on the show, despite the fact he didn't win. He won, didn't get the knockout. But my goodness, when he throws, and I know Daniel Cormier kept saying, right to the body, left to the head, or left to the body, right to the head. It's John Lineker. But my God, when this guy throws, it is ugly, and it impresses me in every fight. We see it all the time, but it impresses me in every fight.
Yeah. So I was at a Halloween gathering with friends and family that night, and John Lineker was on the TV at the bar. And there aren't a ton of casual MMA fans in my area, but I did overhear somebody saying, watch this guy at the bar. So that was kind of cool. You know how I feel about young MMA prospects. Marcelo Golm, 25 years old, choked Christian Colombo pretty much out of a job. I'd say Colombo's donezo. He's been fighting for about 2.5 years, all first-round finishes, all knockouts until his UFC debut, finishes a guy with a rear naked choke. Keeping my eye on him as I do most heavyweight prospects, but a very good show. So many people that the UFC probably needed or wanted to win did win, so that's good stuff. Speaking of needing a win, Michael Bisping, I feel like, in his mind, he feels like he needs a win because his title reign's been thrown into doubt a little bit. You can't say anything about his loss or his win over Luke Rockhold. He knocked the dude out, knocked him out on short notice. Sure, but the title reign since then, fighting Dan Henderson, accepting a fight with GSP. If he loses this fight, I think that he knows that it throws his title reign in question. What do you think?
I say no, it doesn't throw anything into question because, number one, he did, like you said, he knocked out Luke Rockhold. And he did so on short notice because that wasn't a fight that he had a full training camp for. And he asked the UFC for a favor to avenge the one loss that he had, which was Dan Henderson. Controversial or not, he rematched Dan Henderson, did emerge victorious. Then when you take a look at the way this fight was put together, it was supposed to happen last year in December. Okay, yep. It didn't happen because George, with CAA and with WMEI, IMG, ABC, whatever you want to call them, buying the UFC, you had those two powerhouse agents going at each other, causing a little bit of friction with George St. Pierre. Then George had to get surgery. Then George needed more time to get weight. George and USADA. Michael wanted to fight. He wanted to fight. Then he got injured. So there was this lapse of crazy stories along the way. And the fact of the matter is Michael Bisping has been competing for the UFC for a very long time, and in my opinion, rightfully so, deserves a massive payday. Will he get a massive payday? He'll get the biggest payday of his career on Saturday night. To me, that's just a given. But will it tarnish his legacy? For me, it won't, because I think George St. Pierre can beat him because he's a better wrestler. But in terms of the title and defending the title and stuff like that, I could totally buy what you're saying. I can buy what the fans are saying. Just for me, considering the circumstances that have led to this fight here, I don't think it'll tarnish it at all because you're losing to George St. Pierre if you lose.
Yeah, I don't think it'll tarnish his legacy. I think it'll tarnish his title reign. But I think his title reign was just icing on the cake. Like if there were anybody that said, well, you're not a Hall of Famer, and we've seen what a Hall of Famer in the UFC is, they can't say it now. You spoke to Jason Parillo, Michael Bisping's boxing coach. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Focus on Michael because this is a huge fight for his own legacy. Does he look at that kind of stuff and like, man, I would have taken out Anderson Silva. I have a chance to take out George St. Pierre. How can they not consider me one of the best of all time?
Yeah, exactly. I say that in interviews as well. She is, in my opinion, of course, but he should consider one of the best of all time. He's fought everybody, and he's always the underdog. I mean, the underdog in this fight. I mean, I would say maybe 9 of the last 10 fights we've been the underdog in every one of his fights, and he always seems to prevail. So I think he definitely, arguably, could be considered one of the best of all time.
When you look at a guy like Michael Bisping and going over the track record of guys that you trained in the past, from the Tito Ortizes to the BJ Penn to Cyborg, where does he rank in terms of confidence? Because I remember you and I, if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe at the MGM Grand, we had a really cool conversation about the importance of confidence in a fighter leading up to a fight and making sure he or she, like you're paying close attention to where their confidence level is at, that, they're not getting their butt whooped in training all the time, but enough to say, look, we're putting in the work here. You got to put in the hard work. Where does Michael compare to some of the other fighters that you've trained in the past?
Oh, I mean, he's got the confidence of a champion. I mean, and that's what it is. His confidence is definitely at another level. He's been knocking guys out in the gym. On a weekly basis, he's been stopping guys in the gym just about every sparring session we've been in there. So, his confidence right now is as high as it can be. And I don't really necessarily compare any of my other fighters to each other because they all got a little bit different personalities. But the confidence is exactly where it needs to be. And I would say he's more or less confident than any of the other fighters that I've worked with. Just he's got the confidence of a champ.
And he's got the words and the mouth and the wit of another type of champion. This guy, I mean, Michael Bisping, when he goes off, you put the microphone in front of him and the cameras, and he just lets loose. Are you like me sometimes when you look at Mike and you're like, did he just really say that? This guy's on fire.
Yeah, nothing shocks me when it comes to that. I just wait to hear it. Whatever's going to come out, and it's always going to be also entertaining. I mean, they probably got Mike's mouth for this fun. I mean, George has been one to talk shit and run his mouth. So we need somebody in there to do it. So then it definitely helps sell more pay-per-view.
Oh, of course. That's the whole thing. People were saying, how can Michael say, like, as a Canadian, and people know that I know George and I know Mike, like, how can Mike say that? I'm like, guys, he's got to sell the fight. This is what it's all about. This is why you are going to tune in on November 4th, because you either love Michael Bisping, you're a huge fan, and you want to see him destroy that Canadian, or if you're a Canadian, you love the fact that, you know what, we don't like Michael's Bisping. We want to see him go down. And I think Michael's done an absolutely fantastic job of selling this fight.
He really has. Yeah, I agree. I've been doing a lot of travel with him too for the last 6-7 weeks. With it. We were out in New York about 7-8 weeks ago, and obviously Canada. Did I see you on Canada?
Yep, I saw you in Toronto.
No, I didn't. Oh yeah. I saw you in Toronto. That's right. And then so we do that, yeah, exactly. I think like you either love him or hate him. So everybody wants to watch him fight.
He was taking some, I wouldn't say mean shots, but just some shots at Freddie Roach, which is, Michael's going to do that no matter what. But you've been around the boxing game for a very long time. You competed, you fought, and now you get a chance to coach opposite Freddie Roach. Is that something cool for you? Or does that make it more motivational? So, you know what, I can't have Freddie Roach's guy beat my guy.
Of course, it's exciting. I love that they got Freddie Roach over there. Sorry, I was just responding to, I just got a text from Mike. Yeah, no, it's exciting, isn't it? He's considered one of the best boxing coaches out there, so it's definitely more motivating and exciting. I mean, just fighting George St. Pierre is motivating and exciting itself, but obviously he has such a quality coaching staff as well with, Barraz and, of course, Roach. And, I love it. It definitely will make the victory that much sweeter.
Awesome talking to Jason Parillo ahead of this giant fight for Michael Bisping. The biggest of his career, I think, from at least a financial standpoint, obviously. But would you say this is bigger than the Rockhold fight to him personally? Because he hadn't become a champion at that point. But defending his title in such a big situation in a big venue, not big physically, but big historically.
If there was ever a conversation, Sean, of 1A, 1B, and 1C, 1A was Anderson Silva, 1B was the title fight, 1C is George St. Pierre. I mean, what more can Michael Bisping want from his career? He fought, quote unquote, what we all considered the GOAT, beat him, controversially beat him. We can make on record he beat him. Then he gets a title shot.
Beat him in his home country, in England. So.
Right? Then becomes a world champion on short notice, dream come true, Rocky Balboa sort of story. No one gave him a shot. He landed his shot and became the champion, and now fights the other guy many people are considering the greatest of all time, Demetrius Johnson aside. So for Michael Bisping, it's 1A, B, and C, in my opinion. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, man, when you put it like that, it's like beating Anderson Silva in your home country, in London. That show is on your back. Winning the title and then defending a title. Well, and that Dan Henderson fight had to mean a lot to him too, though. Because that has been the ghost that has haunted him forever. More than not being able to get to a title shot was the fact that he was knocked out in what many consider embarrassing fashion to Dan Henderson, to get that monkey off of his back and to have a great fight in, again, his home country on a show that's built on him. Gosh, it's crazy because had Michael Bisping hung it up after the Luke Rockhold fight, I would have been like, man, what a career this guy had. Great career. And the fact that he was able to just reel off win, it says a lot. So we've got this show, UFC 217, giant show. Can't wait to break this down. There's a lot, and we'll work our way. Well, not
Time out. Breaking news. Kamaru Usman has replied.
Oh, really? What did he say?
And I quote, "He's running scared and will probably duck me. That's the fight that people want, and it's the one I want. I'll fight Emil if I have to, but Colby is what makes sense." End quote.
Ooh.
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 Yes.
I like it. I like it. We'll definitely have a story up on that on Fightful.com. So we'll work our way from the bottom. We're not going to talk about all these fights because not all of them are that important. We've talked about Walt Harris and Mark Godbeer before. It happened the way we said it would happen. Eamon Zahabi, you've talked to him about that fight. You all can head over to Fightful.com, check that out. OSP versus Corey Anderson. This is the second fight on Fight Pass.
Yeah. No, it's been moved up.
Did it?
Yeah, it's been moved up to the main card, or to the televised prelims.
Okay, cool. So this is a situation. Patrick Cummins was going to fight Corey Anderson. He got hurt, and in my opinion, this fight is an upgrade now. No disrespect to Patrick Cummins. He is, like I said, a perennial top 15 guy, but you have a legit top 10 light heavyweight fight now, and I don't know who's going to win it.
Mm-hmm. True.
Number 6 versus number 7.
Well, we just don't know, Sean, which OSP is going to show up.
Yeah.
Okay? If we knew, we would say OSP. But we don't know. So I'm still going to lean towards OSP. He's a minus 160 favorite, and that's fair. You could make the argument it should be a minus 200 favorite. Nothing wrong with Corey Anderson, who brings it every single time, but we just don't know which OSP shows up. I like this fight, though. I really like this fight. I'm excited Mickey Gall's fighting. Like that guy's always got, he always puts a smile on my face. I mean, Mickey Gall's a disaster. But yeah, go on. Sorry.
I like this fight a lot more than the one they had scheduled. Very excited to see who emerges out of this one. I don't think Corey Anderson's going to make the same mistake so many make against him, though. You have a couple of heavyweight fights I mentioned, Alexei Oleinik, Curtis Blades, Walt Harris, Mark Godbeer. Just guys trying to battle to get that, break into that 10 to 15 slot. In Cutelaba, that's a guy that I've got my eye on despite his inconsistency. He's had some very entertaining fights. He had that really good one with Cannonier. He had that quick knockout of Da Silva. That's a guy I at least have my eye on, which, I mean, any heavyweight and light heavyweight I do. Randy Brown, Mickey Gall.
Yeah. I like Mickey Gall, man. I just do. I just think he's a disaster. Doesn't give a shit about nothing. Says what he has to say. Calls out and chirps out all the people that quote-unquote don't belong in the UFC. It's just hilarious. And he gets the job done.
3-0 in the UFC.
Yeah, man.
Normally, I would say, okay, a guy with this much experience, 11 fights, maybe that's a step up. I mean, he beat Sage Northcutt. Sage Northcutt had about, I think, 9 at that point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not that incredible of a leap. Randy Brown's been fighting, I think, about as long as Sage Northcutt has, and Mickey Gall's getting it done. You got to believe the UFC wants him to win that fight. It's hard for me to break this down from a technical standpoint because there are a lot of question marks around it. One that I am real excited for, James Vick versus Joseph Duffy. You know that ideally the UFC wants Joseph Duffy to reel off a bunch of wins.
Yes,
because
just in case, yeah.
Just in case they need to run Conor McGregor there, and he's done well in his UFC career. He's 4-1. His one loss was to Dustin Poirier, and no sweat in losing a decision to Dustin Poirier. How do you think this one goes? Because James Vick has been on a tear. Like, outside of the loss to Dariush, just Ramsey Nijam, Nick Hine, Jake Matthews, Trujillo, Reyes. But this may be his biggest challenge outside of Dariush.
On any other card, we'd already be predicting that James Vick versus Joseph Duffy could potentially be a candidate for fight of the night.
Yeah.
we still have the main card to discuss. Right? This is going to be an exceptional fight here. James Vick is the favorite heading into this fight because he's looked absolutely fantastic, especially with his post-fight interview. I'm sorry, Joseph Duffy is the favorite in this fight. My bad. I'd make James Vick the favorite in this fight.
Yeah, that surprises me a little bit, that line. What's the line set at?
Plus 150 for James Vick, minus 170 for Joseph Duffy.
That's a fair line. Maybe a little bit closer.
Yeah, a little bit closer is correct. I would even lean towards James Vick. So hint, hint. My UFC fun bets, you know which one I'm going to talk about right off the top.
Yeah, give us the lines on these as we go through them throughout the top part of the card. Johnny Hendricks, Paulo Borrachina, this is very much a Darren Till, Donald Cerrone situation, in my opinion, where the UFC's like, if Johnny Hendricks wins, good, but if Paulo wins, hey, that's neat. The
opposite for me, though. It's complete opposite for me because,
really?
Paulo's a minus 230 favorite here. Hendricks is a plus 190 underdog.
Yeah.
Going into the Darren Till fight with Cowboy Cerrone, I said Cowboy Cerrone is going to win that fight. Mm-hmm. At the minute this fight was put together, I'm like, Hendricks is not going to win.
Paulo, sure. I meant more from a promotional standpoint. Yep. Like, if a former champion gets a win, good for him. If the 26-year-old Brazilian with a bunch of knockouts and submissions in the first round on his record wins, then okay, cool. We can take him to Brazil. And like I said, that market's starting to look better and better and better with each emerging talent. I think Borrachina is going to finish him.
He's a killer. This guy's a murderer, man. This guy's no joke. And for everyone that's listening in right now or tuned in right now, if you don't recall or you can't think or you don't remember what he competes at, go on Fight Pass, go on YouTube, try and find it. This guy is going to give Hendricks a difficult time, and Sean said he's going to finish him. I will not be surprised if that's the case.
It's been 4 years since the controversial George St. Pierre fight, and Johnny Hendricks has 3 wins in that period. He has not been fighting bad competition. We're talking Robbie Lawler and Matt Brown, Stephen Thompson, Gastelum, Magny, Lombard, but look at who he beat. He beat Matt Brown. Matt Brown's retiring. He beat Hector Lombard. Hector Lombard probably should retire. He couldn't get the job done against Tim Boetsch, and he missed weight. He's missed weight in 3 out of his last 4 fights. Do you think Hendricks shows up on weight here? That's what I'm wondering.
Did you see the live chat when we started the show? The question was, who's going to miss weight at on this card? And there was a period of not real answers, and then someone, I didn't see who it was because I'm not looking at it right now, came on and said, come on, man, Hendricks is on this card. We already know that's going to happen.
What about him training at Jackson and then Andrei Arlovski training at ATT? To me, that's like part of your MMA retirement plan. Like it's factored into everybody's retirement plan. You get old, you switch camps, you go to Jackson's, you retire. Like, let's retire to Albuquerque. Let's do that. They enjoy the warm weather.
It's something that it's so hard to dissect when you think about the decision Johnny had to make with his family and heading out there because he still thinks he has it. What fighter doesn't still think they have it? And to go to Albuquerque all the way from Texas, I don't know how long of a drive that would be, or Oklahoma, depending on where Johnny's staying, but it's a drive and a half. It's a big commitment. And there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just one of those things where, we've heard it before. Conor McGregor is anti leaving your original camp. Yeah. Stay with what you got, or stay with who got you to the big show. But there's going to be times when change is required. How many people end up at TriStar, leave TriStar, go somewhere else, go back to TriStar? Same thing with Jackson. Same thing with AT&T. There's some guys and girls that like to do that. And there's nothing wrong with it. Unfortunately, I mean, there's Johnny Hendricks isn't young. He's not a young fighter anymore. He's not the world champion anymore. And it goes way back to before. And this is when Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman fought the first time in July in Las Vegas, when I got the text from George in his camp saying, hey, we want to do WADA. Yeah. Not that we're saying Johnny Hendricks is cheating, but we want to do WADA. And I read in between that line and said to myself, yeah, you think he is. Something going on here. And other stuff came out afterwards, and off-the-record stuff was discussed. But that was the first sign where George was like, I want to make sure that everybody I compete is clean, and I want to prove I'm clean. We have an example to set here. Lo and behold, didn't happen. Lo and behold, USADA eventually came into the sport, and we started seeing all these different fighters who were so dominant not become so dominant anymore.
Yeah.
Johnny Hendricks is one of those guys. And I'm not saying he cheated or he's done anything, but there's a long list of guys that are either getting popped all the time, John Jones, or getting in trouble, John Jones, or fighters that we thought were so good that no longer are able to be that good because USADA's come in. So, we'll see what happens here. But for Johnny, making the change, going to Albuquerque, hey, man, what if he takes out Paul? What if he finishes Paulo?
That'd be
right?
That'd be big for him, bigger than I think most casual fans would realize. You know what an interesting stat is?
I'm listening.
As of right now, the only win over a current member of the UFC welterweight division that Stephen Thompson has is Jake Ellenberger, who I expect to be cut any day.
Yeah, it's very, very strange.
Robert Whittaker, the champ at 185. Johnny Hendricks moved up to 185. Rory McDonald left. Patrick Cote retired. And Masvidal, if they had a 165 and if he wanted to cut to 155, he'd be there too. This is a very, very fun fight. Masvidal and Thompson. Masvidal, who was hanging around in that 155 division, is ranked number 4 as a welterweight. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's amazing as these guys get older and they change divisions. You get some guys that are doing great, some guys that are not doing so great. Masvidal doing fantastic, moving up to the weight class, and now taking on Stephen Thompson, who recently fought for the title. When
we launched this website, Jorge Masvidal was in a situation at UFC 201 where he was likely fighting for his job.
Yeah, I remember that.
Against Ross Pearson. He had lost to Larkin, he had lost to Ben Henderson, he had lost to Iaquinta, and he had that one win right in between there, but he had lost 3 of his last 4. He hadn't really made that kind of a dent, and then he shows up and he beats Ross Pearson, Jake Ellenberger, and Donald Cerrone. Are any of those 3 guys where they once were? No, but it's still pretty impressive. I get the feeling Stephen Thompson's going to take this. I think he's going to be measured. I think he's going to be calculated. I think that his counters are maybe a little too good for Masvidal. But this is it should be a fun fight, but you never know. It depends on how Wonderboy opts to fight.
That's the case. It's all about what Wonderboy. What Masvidal brings to the table, quote unquote, easy money. He's going to come there. He's going to try and knock Stephen's head into the second row. With Thompson, it's a guy who's already fought for the title twice. It's a long road, in my opinion, for him to get back to a title shot.
Even longer over the past few weeks since this welterweight division has exploded.
So he's still relatively young, but what exactly does it mean for him?
It's not worse. He's 34.
Yeah, right? So you think he's not getting another title shot until he's probably 36, 37 if he goes on a run. And in terms of him going on a run, he would have to do so. Now, you mentioned that he's going to be measured and calculated. The only way, in my opinion, the odds are all just updated. The only way Thompson will start getting closer to a title shot is with crazy-ass finishes.
Yeah.
Right? Because you start putting your stamp on everybody the UFC puts in front of you, and I'm finishing this guy, I'm finishing that guy, I'm not going to a decision. Right? So, Stephen Thompson will have to take risks in some of these fights if he ever wants to get close to a title shot, unless he's got something happening outside of the UFC that we don't know. But I know his family business, the karate school, does absolutely fantastic. Those guys are making money, and that's a tradition that him and his dad has had forever. So he'll never be out of work. He'll never be in a situation where he's not going to make money. And this guy's a good-looking dude. Hollywood is around the corner, right?
Yeah, that's an option too. It's something I hadn't considered, but that is kind of the way he came up. I'm sure every crappy karate movie would love to have him in it.
Yeah, that's terrible.
They would. Let's talk about the big fights.
Oh boy, here we go. What do you got?
I'm ready, man. Joanna and Rose Namajunas. I love this fight. Joanna, rightfully a giant favorite. Her foot accuracy is just special. How she is able to keep a distance with that front kick that we didn't really see employed until like 7-8 years ago whenever Anderson Silva did it. But she's able to do it, and she pushes like with the ball of her foot and the heel. And it's not just a distance thing. It's like one day this is going to really mess somebody up and it's going to send somebody backpedaling and she's going to finish them with that. You cannot get stuck up against the cage with Joanna Jędrzejczyk because you will get hit with every kind of strike. I'm talking elbows, knees, kicks, punches. She will measure you and then she will pick you apart. But one of the tools that Joanna has that a lot of people don't is this really violent snap jab that doesn't finish people. But, like, the way that she puts it, like, you can tell that it registers with her opponent, and they're like, damn, I don't want to make a habit of getting hit with that, but they do, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And while they're registering it, Joanna follows up with something else. Like, it's so different from just her casual, like, when she reaches out jab, she snaps it, and as soon as, like, when it would hit Andrade, she was like, damn, felt that one. Another thing that I love, and you're probably not going to run into it as much with Rose as you did Esparza, but Joanna, how she would just effortlessly just go flat on a sprawl. Just, boom. Like, Esparza has some of the best wrestling in that division, and she would wrap a leg, and Joanna's like, no, and just would go completely flat on top of Esparza. No struggle whatsoever. I really think she's the greatest women's MMA fighter of all time.
I don't think there's an argument there. I mean, you can go up and down and think about it, but unless Holly Holm, even if Holly Holm was to win the featherweight title, I get it, but that's just Joanna will get that 125-pound title if she wants it, right? I just think that the fact that Joanna became the champion the way she did and continued to defend it the way she does, she's the greatest women's fighter of all time right now in mixed martial arts. So it remains to be seen. The only knock I have on her, and I don't think she really truly understands the impact of her words sometimes. Yeah, I know true. She gets in there, she tries to get into her opponent's head, and she does a fantastic job. And we all saw it the very first time against Carla Esparza, how Carla was like, the heck is this? And the extreme confidence that Joanna had, and she does it all the time. But I mean, I think it was a bad look, bad terminology, bad words that she used with Rose Namajunas, saying that she's mentally unstable. This all after Rose was basically saying, "Look, man, part of me is fighting for people to bring up awareness for mental health issues," and then for Joanna to come back afterwards and say, "You're mentally unstable." Okay.
And the mental aspect of the game is a big one, too, and Joanna is real good at it. And Rose has never been that person that exudes a ton of confidence to me. Like, she looks like she fights and lives sometimes with a chip on her shoulder, and there's nothing wrong with that. Michael Bisping fought with a chip on his shoulder for a long time. Look where he is right now. Tyron Woodley has been one of the more successful welterweight champions of all time, and look where he is. He fights with a chip on his shoulder all the time. It doesn't necessarily always make for exciting fights, but Rose's fights don't ever lack excitement. I think she's going to be, at worst, the Uriah Faber of this division. She's 25, and she's always going to be in the title picture, even if she doesn't win the title. She'll be a person that they can slide in there, and you'd be like, okay, understandable. She covers range exceptionally well. You don't want her on your back. She does this thing where she almost uses the mount where almost everybody else uses the mount to finish. She kind of uses it to set up a back take, which I think is really cool. Like, she'll lace a leg through while she's in mount, and then when somebody rolls away from mount to try to get away from it, it's already in there. She's got that hook, and she's throwing down punches. She's throwing down chokes. Now, hooks don't prevent her from getting chokes. She'll throw them in there no matter what, and she'll make the situation happen. That's a part of her body type, that long, lanky body, where she can throw in a body triangle sometimes, and against a Joanna, that's the right kind of body matchup to where if she locks in a rear naked choke, she could switch to the body triangle, and that could be trouble, but a lot easier said than done. This fight is a fun fight. I'm going with Joanna, but Rose is going to be a girl that you see come back and come back and come back in this title slot. I mean, she fought for the first ever championship, and I think that if she fought Esparza today, she would probably beat Esparza, but she was so young in her career at that point that I don't think she was ready for it.
Yeah, no, I think I'm obviously going to favor Joanna in this fight because Joanna is just on a different level. Can Rose pull off the upset? Hell yeah. I think she can. I mean, there's always that one fighter that has the other fighter's number. We haven't seen it with Joanna just yet. The one person to give her real problems. People could say G'day all they want. No.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of time before we see somebody give Joanna problems, and it might be Father Time. We don't know. Or maybe when she moves up, she may have problems with Shevchenko. We don't know. But right now, she's just so dominant. But that's not to say that Joanna can, or that Rose can't get the back, can't control, can't get Joanna to make that mistake on the ground. Right? She'll be punished. But it's going into these title fights. The mentality that you have, that and GSP told me about it all the time. It's hard for champions sometimes to defend their titles, because your job is to defend the title, to win 3 rounds to 2 if it's going to go 5. Mm-hmm. Your job is to finish, but I'm not taking risks if I don't have to, because I am the champion. Things change. Whereas the challenger, chances are 9 times out of 10, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's not for Rose, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They are willing to die in there. That's a different mindset than just trying to defend the belt, a.k.a. what Tyron Woodley is experiencing right now. These fighters that are getting the title shots are willing to die in there. They're not going to give up. They're going to go through hell and back. Whereas the champion's like, I'm already here. I'm already the champion of the world. You got to beat me. So
my question is, Thompson, Masvidal might go the distance. I don't think Borchina and Hendricks will. Do you think UFC will stall for time, knowing that these 3 title fights may all go the distance too? Because I'd really like to get our post show started before 1:45. We do have a UFC 217 post show, by the way, guys. Forgot to plug that. And James, y'all need
to stay up with us, because we're going to be up late.
Oh, it's gonna be a good time. And James Lynch has the MMA Industry Podcast on Thursday, where he talks to members of the MMA media about how they got into it, their experiences. I'm probably going to do some for the pro wrestling media. It's not going to be a regular thing, but I'll do those as well. I was on his show last week. It was a good time. But we got more title fights to talk about, Joe.
Oh, there's more fights at UFC? I thought that was the last fight.
It could have been, and I would have been happy with this card.
Oh, the fight that I've been looking forward to the most since Dominic Cruz lost the title to Cody Garbrandt is finally happening. It's the co-main event, Saturday night, Sean Ross Sapp. Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw. Holy smokes, is this going to be a sick fight.
Yeah, so it's so weird, because when Garbrandt beat Cruz, he went into that fight with so many question marks. And now he goes into this fight, and because of that just monumental improvement that we saw, I don't even know if it was improvement, just the shift in game that we saw, I've got a bunch more questions. How's he going to look 10 months later? Like, what kind of, he's coming off a back injury. How much improvement could he have done during that point? Garbrandt outlasted the greatest bantamweight of all time, who pretty much penned the script on footwork in that division. And he did it by dictating the pace, and that's a term that I hate to hear used over and over and over again, but he really did. As opposed to trying to cut off like Dominic Cruz and his strengths, he was really, really happy to just wait it out, search the range, wait for a counter. And that's not something that you see a lot of. He becomes really aware when his opponents are trying to recover, and he pounces on that. One of my favorite things that he doesn't do is he doesn't worry too much about the third man in the cage, the referee. He's not over there trying to avoid the referee or get the referee to make an early stoppage. He uses, if he knocks somebody down, he measures them and finishes them. There's been times when he'll point at Dominic Cruz or something like that, but I think that was as much a part of his game as anything, was that he wanted to get in the head even while in the cage of Dominic Cruz. He's got a really good strike style where he punches, steps through, lets the momentum carry him forward, and then switches his stance, which you will see a lot of out of bantamweights especially. That's just something that so many of them do that each other one has had to adapt to. There's also this, he searches for his range really well. He looks for the opportunity to land a tight right hand, which is a different method than some of his wider punches, but his tight right hand works really well. There's just a lot of cool, he's a breath of fresh air, because a lot of those guys fought fought similar. Like, do you remember, Joe, when Brock Lesnar showed up and every heavyweight just had to be 265 pounds, roided up, and tried to fight the same way? That almost became the thing with Cruz. Like, everybody saw what Cruz did, and they're like, well, we got to do that. No. Cody Garbrandt did things a little bit different, and it won him the title.
I mean, that fight still lives on in infamy in my head, because I was in Japan when that fight was going down and wasn't able to do anything other than the fact that I'm calling fights for Ryzen, and next thing you know, I'm getting these updates with Ronda and Cody. Cody Garbrandt's the world champion. He defeated Dominic Cruz. What? It was like, oh my God, what's happening here? Oh, and I remember when I got home, I had to crash, obviously, because there's a long flight and time zone change. But the first thing I did is, I want to see, by the time I even had a chance to even look at the Ronda Rousey fight, it was so quick, I saw it on my phone. But the Garbrandt fight and Cruz fight, I had to watch it and was just mesmerized, absolutely mesmerized by Cody's performance. Not just technically from an MMA perspective, but just in general, the attitude, the cockiness, the crazy stuff he was doing, the struts and in the cage. So that Dillashaw fight is something I've wanted for such a long time, and now we're going to see, what does that back injury and that back surgery and all that stuff, and what is it going to do to Cody right now? He's saying it's nothing. TJ's remained relatively composed leading up to this fight here. He's not letting Cody get into his head. We're seeing changes at Team Alpha Male right now with Uriah Faber no longer having Justin Buchholz as the head coach. And I know Justin and those guys had a meeting with Cody or with TJ recently. So there's some weird stuff going on between, again, Dillashaw, Garbrandt, Team Alpha Male, Justin, Uriah, and there's a lot of mental things that are going on here. But once these two step into the octagon, we'll see what's going to happen. In my opinion, I think Cody should be able to emerge victorious, because it's almost like, these three guys, Garbrandt, Dillashaw, and Cruz, they're not replicas of each other, but they sort of are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just the styles are a little different in terms of what they bring to the cage, but Cody's just this incredible fighter and has the ability to be a huge star. But Dillashaw has more than enough skills and a training camp and an understanding that, we can break this guy down and make him pay for things that he's unaware of, right? And a lot of it's mental.
Isn't it amazing? No matter what the changes, no matter who leaves the camp, there's always a guy at Team Alpha Male ready to compete at the top level. Isn't that just insane? It kind of reminds me of the New England Patriots to a degree. Like, no matter what pieces leave, like, that team just inserts somebody in, they become a star. Hey, your coach leaves? Whatever. Here you go. What about this guy? Oh, he doesn't like it here. He's leaving in a couple months. See ya. We got a new guy ready. It's kind of impressive. From a technical standpoint, Dillashaw's footwork is probably better, but it wasn't better than Cruz's, and that fight was really close. So it's tough to say like that made any giant measure of a change. But we saw Dillashaw try to play Cruz's game, and it didn't work out for him. He lost. We saw Garbrandt work on timing and countering and succeeded, but Dillashaw's footwork leads his opponents into the fence, where he does the same thing. He switches stances, throws combos. We've seen Dillashaw address his holes against a guy like a Sun Sao, where he avenged a loss. One of the keys to Dillashaw's game, I see him throw, or especially against Lineker, he would feint, throw, would drop, and then lock the leg around, like the sweeping takedown, and then lock the body. He did that like 4 or 5 times on Lineker, where Lineker was off balance and taken down before Dillashaw even touched the back of his legs. Now, can he do that against Garbrandt? I doubt it. I don't think so against Garbrandt. Garbrandt is a much better wrestler, but this is a high level fight. This is, man, like, because of the disparity between Joanna and Rose, this is, I don't want to say the people's main event, but this is like the undercover main event of the show.
Yeah. I mean, this is a sick fight. No matter what anyone says, I know that the mentality for most people is bigger is better, and that 135ers should not be headlining a show. I'm sorry. This is a sick fight. It would have probably been better. I don't even know if it's the truth, though, Sean. Better once the Ultimate Fighter, their season of Ultimate Fighter concluded. I still don't know. And again, I could be pleading modern day ignorance what the Ultimate Fighter does for anything anymore. If it's anything that they do for shows or for fights, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at this current season of the Ultimate Fighter thinking, I just lost Justin Gaethje for almost a year after he came off and did that performance in the Octagon. So, I mean...
What about Conor McGregor saying that he's got his eye on Justin Gaethje, too? Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, Conor McGregor is planting seeds. He's doing the old... Conor McGregor's doing what Conor McGregor does, what Chael Sonnen did back in the day, is you got fights ahead of you, but you're planting seeds everywhere else, right? Conor's confidence with striking is going to be through the roof right now.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He went what, 9-10 rounds with Floyd Mayweather? You know, he's going to come in and say he's the greatest striker ever.
I would
this,
agree.
This, and that, right? So there's a lot of stuff there for Conor. I've seen some funny memes of Nate Diaz saying, I haven't priced myself out of the market. It's just you guys can't afford me. Well, if that Nate Diaz fight isn't on the table anymore, and now that we have Tony Ferguson as the interim champ, his management, which is they share the same manager, both Conor and Ferguson, and he's basically saying that fight is going to take place. It's just a matter of when. You manage both guys. You can pretty much decide when that fight's going to take place, right? You're in touch with both guys, so you're in the middle. You're basically being almost like the UFC sort of thing, right? So, Khabib's taking on Edson Barboza. There's options there for Conor, no matter what. You know, we talked about Joseph Duffy earlier on. Now he's talking about Justin Gaethje. Options are there for Conor. Always going to be there.
Main event time, Joe.
Yeah, here we go.
Bisping, GSP. I am made of questions here. GSP hasn't fought in 4 years, never fought at middleweight. Bisping, a former light heavyweight. He's a big dude. He adapts really, really well, that being Bisping. So I'll point at instead, we know Bisping's game. We know GSP's game, but we don't know GSP's game at middleweight. He pretty much was that same fighter from like 2007, 2008 throughout his whole career. He didn't have to adapt and evolve a whole lot. He was like that wrestle boxer, but the thing is, like, he had that great jab. He had a great Superman punch. He had a great straight. He had great single legs, double legs, kicks. And other guys were just trying to catch up on that. Like, he didn't really have to add a ton to his game. He would submit guys, but towards the end of his career, it didn't happen a lot. He has really good control with his knees, where he would gain top control and then walk his body up and just smother people. Inside the guard, he was really, really dominant, but that was against guys that were a little closer to his size. And guard over the past 4 years has been negated even more in MMA. Like, we don't see it, like the threats that we saw once before. I don't put it past Bisping if he does get taken down to work from the bottom, because he's going to be physically, he's going to have maybe a bit of an advantage there, holding GSP there, working elbows, things like that. If he can find some success there, we've seen some guys do some damage that can last through 5 rounds. Like, if you throw an elbow from the bottom in the guard and you cut somebody right here over the eye, that pays dividends in rounds 3 and 4. Now, there's one thing that I noticed that Bisping really, really does that GSP could capitalize on. But I'm sure Bisping has changed his game plan accordingly. Bisping will square up his hips if you watch that Luke Rockhold knockout, and he will lean into his punches, and that puts him off balance. If you put yourself off balance trying to punch George St. Pierre and he can take that punch, you're probably going to end up on your face or on your back. Like, he's going to probably take you down a little bit. CB Dollaway has really similar double legs to George St. Pierre, and Bisping was able to fight off some deep attempts, but fell victim to a couple others. Now, that was years ago. That was a long time ago. Bisping has done nothing but get better at preventing takedowns since then. So, gosh, this is like just, we don't know what to expect of GSP. I can't believe it's been 4 years since he's been gone. Like, it seems like last year, the year before, but this is just such a crazy fight that we're about to see.
It's one of those things where, like you said, we just don't know. It's been such a long time since George competed. Bisping has an incredible work rate, as does George. George now has to potentially deal with or not really carry a heavier body, but a stronger body, a more powerful body, one that hits hard. People do not respect Bisping's power. He hits hard, believe it or not. He hits extremely hard. Even one of those jumping knees can be pretty dangerous if you time it correctly. You don't want to do it against George, technically speaking, but if the right opportunity presents itself and George is on the back heel, you can throw that jumping knee if George begins to move forward. And rest assured, I mean, Bisping would love to throw a knee as George comes in for a takedown. So it is one of those things. I mean, on paper, and we know paper doesn't fight paper. On paper, George, technically, despite being off for 4 years, is the better wrestler. And the better wrestler will generally dictate where the fight is going to take place. So if that's the case, George will determine where this fight's going to take place. But he's going to have a lot of work to do. The work that Michael Bisping will allow him to do, or the work that Michael Bisping is going to make George do, could fatigue George. Or has George specifically taken all this extra time to deal most specifically with really big, strong bodies, much bigger than anything he's ever faced in the past, where he can understand that his muscles are going to have to recuperate, get a whole lot of oxygen to continue fighting at a pace, because George always built his career on, they can't match my rhythm. They can't keep up to my rhythm. And if you're working, I mean, you know this, Sean, if you're sparring with someone or competing against someone, and at the same time you're going to their rhythm, you're going to get tired because you're not going to your natural pace. So George's whole thing is to get you to work at his heart rate, his rhythm, so you fatigue easier. Some of the tricks he used to do with BJ Penn that people don't really know about, he talked about it in the post-fight press conference at UFC 94, was, you know, when he had BJ Penn up against the cage and BJ was working those underhooks, they were scientific. They did this scientifically, where they broke down BJ Penn's body type and the type of delts that he had, that he would have to carry. George wasn't going for the takedown. He was there against the cage, but he was making BJ carry him and carry him and carry him to the point his arms would fatigue, and then you'd see George lay off and then come in with the combinations trying to finish him. Will he be able to do that to Michael Bisping? No idea. We don't know what that game plan is. All I know is that Faraz Zahabi and the team always find ways to surprise us. We don't know. And I know George does a lot of studying in terms of the human body and scientifically what a specific body type does in certain situations. In my opinion, George should dictate where this fight will take place. I also know Michael Bisping hits like a truck, and this thing could end at any time.
Yeah, I can't wait to cover it. I can't wait to see it. This is a major card, Madison Square Garden. We got a live post show right after UFC 217. Tons of stuff at Fightful's YouTube. Tons of stuff at Fightful.com. I encourage you guys to go there for all your MMA news. But that's not the only show we're covering that weekend. We'll briefly talk about it, but Bellator 186, it's at Penn State. They're loading it up with amateur wrestlers. They have Tywan Claxton, Logan Storley, some really good prospects on the prelims. Then you got Ed Ruth, who I've interviewed. That's on Fightful.com. He's fighting Chris Dempsey. This is his biggest challenge yet. I think Ed Ruth's winning that fight. Zach Freeman, who beat Aaron Pico, they have booked him against Syed Awad, who is in our Fightful rankings for Bellator. So that's a big step up in experience for Zach Freeman. Good move, in my opinion. Phil Davis facing a 39-year-old undefeated Leo Leet, who I think Phil Davis is probably going to finish. Elima McFarlane against Emily Ducati. McFarlane beat Ducati last year. I think she's going to win this fight again, but it's not just your run-of-the-mill women's fight. It is for women's flyweight championship. Then Ryan Bader, who Fightful.com also interviewed this week, against Linton Vassell, who Fightful.com also interviewed this week for the light heavyweight championship. By the way, we also interviewed McFarlane and Ducati, all up on Fightful.com. But Bader versus Vassell could be good. Vassell, I'll never count out. I'm just not going to count him out of any fight because, didn't think he was going to beat Newton. Didn't think he was going to beat Carmone. Didn't think he was going to beat McGarry, and he beat all three of them. So if he manages to beat Ryan Bader, would it surprise me? Yes. But am I saying it's not going to happen? No. But some fun fights, some fun matchups on this show. May not be fun fights. I don't know how those will play out, but they got the right kind of crowd for this, Joe. They ran it at Penn State, so if there's a lot of wrestling, maybe it doesn't get booed as much.
No, Bader will get booed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bader's getting booed no matter what.
Yeah. Win or lose, he's going to get booed because obviously with his defeats of Phil Davis. So it is what it is. But I'm looking forward to it. I do want to ask you guys a question, yourself, Sean, of course, and everybody on the live chat. Unfortunately, those listening afterwards, we apologize that I can't get your answer. But you could hit me up on social media with your thoughts at Showdown Joe. What is the buzz for George St. Pierre's return? This is going out to everybody. What is the buzz in your parts? Remember, you're hardcore MMA fans. You live and breathe this. But what is the buzz right now for George St. Pierre returning to the UFC? Because I can tell you right now, I'm a Canadian. I live on the outskirts of Toronto. Sean knows it's called the Greater Toronto Area, the GTA. There's no buzz.
There's not a lot. No, I'm expecting this to be like a 500,000 pay-per-view.
Now,
that's where we are, I think.
In Canada, can this change? It's Tuesday. The fight's on Saturday. Can this change in my parts with certain promotional tactics that the UFC may have in store with their broadcast partner, with radio buys, with any sort of buys, stuff popping up on your Facebook, on your Instagram, and whatever? Potentially. But I can assure you, I can tell you that right now, the buzz for George St. Pierre competing just isn't there. This is the lowest that I personally remember George St. Pierre competing. And one of the main reasons is this thing here is just not going off, Sean. No one's asking me. No one's calling. The radio. I did more radio interviews for Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather than I've done for George St. Pierre. I've only done 2 for GSP thus far. I have another one for Sportsnet on Friday. I may have another one for TSN on the West Coast because Ontario won't call me. But yeah, so from a Canadian perspective, Sean, and everybody tuned in right now, it's not there. It's just not there yet.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, but UFC did this to themselves by abandoning the Canadian market. We've talked about that a ton. And they did it to themselves because they pussyfooted around with bringing GSP back. This could have happened in the early part of the year. This could have happened at UFC 200. This could have happened any number, or not UFC 200, just at International Fight Week this year. This could have happened in any number of places, but they didn't want to pay GSP what they wanted to. GSP got out of the testing pool. He wanted to come back. They didn't believe him. Then he took himself out of the testing pool. That's that. But yeah, I think if he wins, there'd be maybe some more buzz for his next fight. Maybe. These days, it's how you fight more than who you are, I think, because Conor McGregor fights are always exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. May not be the best fighter in mixed martial arts, but damn right you turn it in. Yeah. I thought for sure there'd be a lot more hype in my parts, but the reason why I asked the question, Sean, is mainly because I had a meeting this morning, 10 a.m., just down the, I would say 15 miles from where I live, with a prominent party that's involved on the outskirts of the mixed martial arts business. And he just asked me flat out, he's like, if we look around this coffee shop right now, do you think anyone knows George St. Pierre is fighting? I said, I guarantee you they don't, because none of them have come up to me. None of them are looking at us. None of them are even anything. And I was asking him, and he just said, man, the UFC's taken a huge hit in this country. You need to get back on the air. And I said, change topic, because it's just the UFC did it to themselves here. As much as there's only so much Fightful MMA can do. Am I correct? There's only so much Fightful we can do. We're doing our part. We're talking about it. We love it. We have all these amazing peeps in the live chat right now showing us love, but it's outside of our bubble where these big fights take place. And it happened with Conor and Floyd. It happened back in the day with George. It's just not happening right now, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you right now. It could change. It's still Tuesday. We'll see.
Well, they need to all come to our live discussion page. They need to follow us on Twitter, at Fightful Online, at Fightful MMA. We're going to have live tweets of the show. We're going to have live discussion of the show. Of course, we're always there on the forums to talk about it. Guys, I'm going to start doing some news updates across MMA and wrestling in video form as well. You all seem to be liking those, so I figured I'd try it out throughout boxing and MMA too. But yeah, lots of stuff. As you can see, follow Showdown Joe, at Showdown Joe. Fightful.com is the place to be. Tons of exclusives there. But Saturday night, post UFC 217, join us, my friends. Until next time, we're out.